Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Thomas's Reading Room. Have been reading chapters out of Trip Across the Pond, a personal Vietnam experience. The author, me, Thomas K. DuGan. And we're coming into summer here now. It reminds me a lot about like when I was in Vietnam. It was 126 degrees Fahrenheit by around 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, and it was about 100, and felt like anyway, about 110% humidity. We could drink a beer as we were drinking it, it would come out. We could watch it ooze out of our bodies. And at that time I wore, or had 180 pounds of equipment, radio, batteries, so forth, on my body that I carried when we went out on operation. I remember one time traveling through the rice paddy and my leg sinking down to the knee, and then I pulled the other leg out and did this for about 600 meters. I think I thought at that time if Charlie came down with a rifle to shoot me, I would just have a grin, like it would have been a blessing. Well, let's get on today. It's been a while since we've started some new chapters. I see that we have a great, enormous amount of viewers now. So here we go. This is Duties at Camp Bearcat. Not needed any longer to pull a radio watch at Bentwerth, the remainder of the time with the 9th Division was doing various details. Many of the details, such as guard, KP, filling ditches with dirt, burning shit, were the least desired, and having my driver's license helped to avoid them. One day I would pull guard duty. The next day I would drive an officer somewhere. There was KP. It was not too bad, as I would drive a deuce and a half loaded with garbage, 30-gallon cans of food waste, to a nearby sanitary fill outside the base camp. At the roof of the cab of the deuce and a half was a circular steel ring that a 50 caliber machine gun was mounted to. I always took a soldier to ride shotgun with me, though when we arrived at the sanitary fill, the soldier riding shotgun would unload the cans and other debris we may have had. Mamasans would come from everywhere and overtake the back of the deuce and a half. It was like flies on a tin can full of food. I would stand on the passenger side inside the steel ring and aim the 50 caliber machine gun. Shit, a lot of good that would do. Those people only wanted to eat, and if I shot them, it would have been a blessing. On Mama-san rolled her right sleeve, then reached into one of the 4 cans of food waste and miraculously pulled out an undamaged tomato. She wiped it off on her blouse, then repeated the process. After the 3rd time, she looked at me, then smiled. As I kept looking at her, I gave a grin of compassion. It seemed in her smile that swept across her tanned, wrinkled face that she was saying, "Life has been hard. Thanks." There I was, behind a 50 caliber machine gun. Where the fuck was I anyway? Was what was being observed real? Looking down at the ground, there was a baby son, boy, pointing to the heel of his left foot. Along the side of his heel was a gash approximately 3 inches long. Apparently the baby son had cut the heel on a lid of a can. Soon Mama-san came, bent down and grabbed a handful of dirt, then packed the dirt into the wound. The bleeding stopped, and Mama-san proceeded to curse baby-san for getting the heel cut. The soldier riding shotgun had finished unloading the food waste. The show was over. We went back to Camp Bearcat. A few times there came the opportunity to drive for Sergeant Major Graham, and that was a special event for me. He was always uplifting, took no shit from anyone, and ran our battalion with an iron hand. Simultaneously, he could smile and joke with the best of everyone. He and Sergeant Terrell would be leaving the 9th Division soon, and I wanted to leave with them. Speaking of Sergeant Terrell, we made another trip to Saigon for a bit of enjoyment, or was it pleasure? Driving down the road, going past the 2 villages, Sergeant Terrell pulled out his .357 Magnum, pointed toward the floor of the Jeep, and fired around. Sergeant Terrell successfully put a hole the size of a nickel in the floor of the Jeep. He also would take shots at the traffic signs that were constructed of cement. Arriving in Saigon, Sergeant Terrell and I stopped at the rice mill on Bandung Island and showered. Later, we left my Jeep, our weapons, and took a taxi into the city of Saigon, where we visited a massage parlor. That massage parlor was deluxe. The sauna had good pine wood in it, and I did around 50 push-ups before getting out and taking an ice-cold shower. Walking to a room, I laid face up on the massage table. A baby song, girl, long black hair, no large breasts to speak of, and weighing about 75 pounds, came in and proceeded to give me a massage. She worked me over like I never had been worked over before. As she massaged the muscles, she would simultaneously keep an eye on my face for any expression of discomfort. She even cracked the joints in my toes without causing any discomfort. After the front of me had been thoroughly massaged, I rolled over onto my stomach. Baby Song climbed up onto the massage table. She took hold of a chrome railing fastened to the wall and walked ever so carefully onto my back. With her feet becoming her hands, she went over the entire back side of me, massaging the muscles with her feet. Like before, she simultaneously kept an eye on my face. All that, no head job, and the cost was less than $5 American. Walking out of that place, I could feel every muscle in my body tingle like I never felt before. I felt more alive than in my entire lifetime, and I thought it would be good if there was something in the United States that was as good, not costing an arm and a leg. Leaving Saigon, we were driven back to Bandung Island by taxi. Waiting for Sergeant Terrell so we could leave, I began to read or look at a Saigon newspaper. There was a picture of a wristwatch, and below the picture it read, Rabu, 1 jewel, 300 piastres. That was less than $3 American. I smiled, thinking, what the hell, the plywood was free. Sergeant Terrell finally came. We took our weapons, climbed into the Jeep, and made our way to Camp Bear Cap. Another duty enjoyed by me was being in charge of picking up the radio rations, soda, and beer. Once a week, a soldier and I took a 3/4-ton truck from the motor pool to a place where the soda and beer was kept. The soldier placed one end of a track with rollers on top of the tailgate and the other end on a stack of sodas. A sergeant would have some papers for me to fill out and sign. Standing inside the back of the truck, I took the cases of soda and beer and stacked them. Our company was allowed 30 cases of soda and beer each. As the cases were put on and shoved up the track, I would count them aloud. 1 case would go by, 1, then 2 more cases would go by, 2. Eventually, I would get to 30, and we would have approximately 40 to 45 cases of beer. That was done only for the beer. Back at the company, I would sell some of those cases, and keep a personal stock for my comrades and me. There were many days when I personally drank a case of beer a day. The company commander of headquarters did not have much love for me. He was a devout soldier and played by the book. It seemed to me that he lacked the intelligence to be able to differentiate at any great degree. One day he assigned a Negro and me to the task of filling a ditch to a certain point with dirt. It seemed that he thought the ditch was too deep. However, I think that he wanted to see me out in the sun burning. The Negro and I had to walk a distance of 50 feet to get a shovel of dirt, then carry the dirt back to the ditch. The weather was somewhere around 126 degrees, and I thought there must be a better way, an easier way. Putting the brain to work, I came up with an idea. The Negro helped me to construct a grader made from wood that would fit the front bumper of a Jeep. The Jeep was checked out by me from the motor pool. The blade part was a piece of 2 by 10 inch, and the length was the width of the Jeep. 2x4s were used to create arms for the grader blade part to the Jeep's bumper. At the bumper, the 2x4s were notched and tied with rope. To hold the grader down, the Negro and I used bags of sand. Pushing dirt into the ditch was okay, though before backing up, the Negro had to take the sandbags off. Later in the day, the company commander came riding by in the company jeep and observed my invention. He shook his head and began talking to the driver. That night, the driver told me the company commander had told him DuGan would do anything to get out of working. The driver said the company commander was disgusted. Everyone at headquarters laughed. Robert Kelly said, "Never a dull moment when DuGan's around." That was what seemed to me a pretty Vietnamese woman who was hired to work at Camp Bearcat. She resided at the village of Bentwerth. Although she had a ride to Camp Bearcat each morning, she had not a way to get back in the evening. That was where I came in. I used a jeep that normally carried the 105 recoilless rifle. When the time came, each evening a soldier riding shotgun, the pretty Vietnamese woman, and I would head out to Bentwerth via 2 villages in Long Ben. That drive was given the name Bonsai Run. From the moment we left until the time we reached Long Ben, I would keep the right foot on the accelerator pedal to the floor. The speedometer went from 0 to 85, and between 0 and 85 were the words miles per hour. The pointer of the speedometer would be pointing toward the P, approximately, all the way to Long Ben. That did not seem to bother the Vietnamese woman. Of course, I was a damn good driver with much balls. When we arrived at her house, she would always refresh us with a beer or two. Although neither I nor the few soldiers that rode shotgun ever engaged in sexual pleasure due to a great respect we had for her, we often sat on her bed. The bed came noteworthy to me as it was well constructed and very firm. We talked and learned much from her about the ways of the Vietnamese culture. A couple of soldiers had caught a lizard that seemed not harmful at first. However, after being caged, the lizard began to get mean. The soldiers killed it. We gave the lizard to the Vietnamese woman as she said it was rare and she would give its remains to the museum that she spoke of earlier. Leaving her house, I would drive hell-bent for sheep's tail back to Camp Bearcat. One soldier that rode with me, a shotgun, once said, "DuGan, you are a crazy sons of a bitch." One time, on our way back to Camp Bearcat, I stopped outside Long Ben and revved the engine, then let out the clutch quickly to see how fast the Jeep would move off the proverbial line. Things did not go too well, as one of the 2 rear axles twisted in half. There were no tools with us to remove the axle, so as I could drive us onto Camp Bearcat with the front wheel drive. Soon a Jeep, the military police, drove up to where we sat. After explaining the situation to one of the 2 soldiers, they thought they could get us some tools. They left and came back with a couple of tools that did the job. The soldier riding shotgun and I thanked them. Putting the Jeep into 4-wheel drive, we headed back to Camp Bearcat. Actually, the Jeep handled better than before, and I was impressed. Another time, driving through Long Ben on our way back to Camp Bearcat, many Vietnamese workers were going home from work. My Jeep was moving approximately 35 miles per hour when a Papasan turned and walked in front of my Jeep. The front of my Jeep hit him instantly. He flew over the Jeep and landed in the ditch at the right side of the road, perhaps 20 feet behind us. "Let's go back and pick him up," said the soldier who was riding shotgun. "You go back and pick him up if you want to," I said. The soldier riding shotgun went back to the Vietnamese worker that laid somewhere in the ditch. He carried him back to the Jeep as I held the M16 rifle, making sure no one got close to us. It seemed like there were people coming from everywhere, and no sons of a bitch was going to put a bullet or a knife in us. Once Papasan was in the Jeep, we got in and went to where the ROK construction site was. The ROK was the Republic of Korea. We carried Papasan to an aid station and a doctor looked him over. The Vietnamese worker had a cut going from eye to eye. A big chunk of flesh was taken from his upper lip area, and perhaps he had a broken leg or hip. The soldier riding shotgun and I left for Camp Bearcat, and I entertained thoughts that Papasan, during the entire time, had not spoken a word, nor was there a tear in either eye. Reliving the experience, I was puzzled and thought the whole thing was funny. I had even laughed. I remembered a sergeant telling me if he wanted to survive over in Vietnam, You had better learn to laugh when you saw something ugly." He was correct, and I was glad to have taken his advice. One day, Sergeant Terrell and I went to the airstrip where the original Camp Bearcat was, home of the Green Beret. We got out of the Jeep and walked into a small building where there was a bar. The wall of the bar and the surrounding walls were lined with bamboo. Above the bar was a short wall that came down from the ceiling approximately 2 feet. It was made of bamboo with centerfold pictures out of Playboy magazines spaced across it. Sergeant Terrell spoke with the Green Beret, and the Green Beret told how they had been teaching the Vietnamese how to parachute. Because some of the Vietnamese did not weigh much, they did not do too well. The parachute never opened up for them. The Green Beret said they had to put weights on them. After Sergeant Terrell finished doing whatever he had in mind, we left and went back to our camp, Camp Bearcat. Another day, Sergeant Terrell had to go to Tonsanute Air Force Base and see somebody about something, so I drove him. We checked in at the rice mill, showered, and then we went to Tonsanute Air Force Base. Sergeant Terrell spoke with a colonel, and I looked at several pictures of different jets that were being used in cameras that were inside them. Leaving the colonel, Sergeant Terrell and I stopped at the NCO club and enjoyed a barbecued steak. We drank with a few sergeants, told some seemingly good stories, then left the club. Leaving Tonsanute Air Force Base, there was a Jeep painted black, and I wondered. Only 2 blocks down the road from Tonsanute Air Force Base, we were stopped by heavy bumper-to-bumper traffic. Looking over to the left of me, there was a military Jeep painted red. Sitting behind the steering wheel was a woman that looked to me much like Doris Day, and she was wearing a red mini dress with large white dots printed on it. She looked so damn beautiful sitting there in that red Jeep. All I could do was stare. She not once looked over or acknowledged anyone, at least not until Sergeant Terrell did the dumbest thing I could think of. Sergeant Terrell did not see the woman, and he became frustrated with having to wait for the traffic to move again. "I'll fix this," he said, after he started swearing. He got out of the Jeep and stood with the right arm held straight up with a .357 Magnum in his hand. Sergeant Terrell fired off a round, and it was as if everything had stopped. Strange enough, the traffic began to move quickly, and we were on our way back to Camp Bearcat. Arriving back at Camp Bearcat, I rested, then continued doing my everyday duties until one day I was asked to be the battalion driver, an offer I could not refuse. Besides driving, the only other job was pulling guard duty. There was a rumor going around about soldiers being rotated, creating an infusion list, and that seemed interesting to me. Driving officers allowed me to learn many things I otherwise would not know about beforehand. One officer informed me that we would be pulling out in a couple of days to join other battalions in an operation. That was okay with me, as I did not like staying in one place too long. Try to get this letter out. Dear Dad and Mom, this is March 11th, 1967. How is everything going? Fine, I trust. Well, it's about time I write. I haven't heard from anyone for some time. Not much has happened lately. Our battalion has moved to Operation Junction City, and I'm staying back here, the base camp battalion driver. I was driving a Vietnamese girl home from the Bearcat camp to her home, and in the way back, when I and a sergeant were driving through this other camp called Long Ben, the Vietnamese workers were walking down the road. I was driving slow, and all at once this one worker turned in front of my Jeep. I hit him, spinning him around about 3 times, and then he flew in the ditch. I stopped the Jeep and went back to see what kind of shape he was in. He was bleeding pretty bad, and there were Vietnamese people gathering around. I went to my Jeep and loaded my weapon. Then we took the worker and went to the aid station. There they cleaned him up, and he had a broken nose, cut across the eyes, and from his nose to his mouth was split open, and his leg was bruised. But other than that, he was okay. So we went on our way back to camp. Have you gotten my film yet? Let me know, so I'll ease my mind, and also you can get the $50 money order I sent to pay for the film and my income tax. Won't be long, and I'll be stateside again. Time is going fast over here. The humidity is getting worse though. I have been working hard and still 7 days a week. Hope you enjoy the pictures. After you get through with them, send them to me. I would like to see them then. Send them back to you. We'll close now. Right soon. Love, Tom. Thank you. Thank you for watching. And our next chapter is Trip to the 196th Light Infantry, Monsoon in the Last Days with the 9th Division. Thank you. Tell your friends to come and listen to a great book, great stories. Thank you.